Well, Dave, I have a history in medicine. I was a respiratory therapist. When I retired from that, I became a court-appointed child advocate. So when the pandemic hit in 2009, the false flag H1N1 pandemic, people were talking about forced vaccinations. Oh, I'm sorry. And I got concerned as well. So what I did, having experience with the Ohio Revised Code from my court-appointed special advocacy, I started looking through the codes in Ohio to see if the legislators had passed any rules or laws which would require the people to accept the H1N1 vaccine. Once I started reading these codes, the language caught my attention. And the very first article I wrote on the topic was written in 2009, and it's called Our Government is a Corporation. And you can find that by typing in your address bar, parentsagainstmandatoryvaccines.com, and go to that website. That was my first website, and scroll down on the left, and it's listed, Our Government is a Corporation. And that is my research of how it is that all these agencies are on Dun & Bradstreet. Why is it they don't seem to represent the people? Why are we always frustrated? Because we call them and we get public relations people. They don't respond to us. They don't answer to us. I even tested it myself when they brought in the school-located vaccination clinics right here into my own municipality. And I sent the school board a little letter saying, you know, this vaccine there's a problem with it. It's not properly tested. The drug companies have no liability should it cause harm and injury to your children. I got a very curt letter back, not from the school board, interesting, from the business manager of the school district, thanking me. Well, I know, you expressed your opinion, basically, is what he said. I still have the letter, but we've already signed a business contract with the public health department, and we're going to have and that was it. It was a business contract that they'd already signed, exchanging money so that these clinics would be allowed on the campus, quote unquote, of our school district. And basically, they've completely blew me off, like, we don't care what you think, and don't bother us.
What's funny about this, we know that California, with their mandatory vaccines with, SB 277?
Right.
They're telling everyone to put something into their body. Even if you object, you still have to put it into your body. And, for children, I have children, and for children to go to school, they want you to be completely vaccinated. And, at the time, I didn't know any better. But today, I don't think I would do it the same way.
Right.
I'm completely against giving them additional vaccines or Gardasil. I have girls, or Gardasil or anything like that, because, to me, I don't see the purpose in all of this. And those people that make the case that, if you're not going to get vaccinated, you're going to infect other people. Well, everyone can make their own decisions, and they have the right to do that. And if you don't want to catch something, you can vaccinate, your child. And if someone else doesn't want to vaccinate, that's fine.
The elephant in the room on all of this, though, there's an elephant in the room that people aren't aware of. In 2011, there was a Supreme Court decision, Brucewitz versus Wyeth. Now, if you didn't know about that as a parent, doesn't that tell you something right there? Why aren't you told this? This decision gave the manufacturers and all the people in the pipeline who do the injecting, from your doctor to your public health nurse to the nurse, everyone, total immunity from any liability should that product cause harm or injury. Now, if you think about it, what is their motivation to ensure that it won't cause harm or injury? None. They have no motivation. They can put anything in it they want. They can get rid of their toxic chemicals, and there's nothing in our legal system that would stop them from doing that. Now, why would anybody accept an injection of a pharmaceutical product that is totally unwarranted and the producer has a complete and total exemption from any and all liability?
Why?
Yeah, why?
Why would they do that?
Because the public relations system is so effective that they lie to the people. They don't tell the people what I just told you. And so they keep the people completely ignorant. They keep the doctors ignorant. I'm married to a retired physician. And when I showed him this information about that Supreme Court case, then I gave him the details of what they call the vaccine court. He had not been told any of that. He was shocked. He said, "Are you kidding?" He was shocked.
So they don't tell the medical establishment,
right?
You know, any of this. That they're just, and I've said, I mean, I have doctors in my family, and
right.
What they tell me is they are learning certain things that are coming down from the pharmaceutical companies, from the medical establishment, of the things they want them to know.
Right.
And, you know, they don't know anything else.
Right. They're taught very little toxicology. And they screen, I know this, and my husband is, we have a different last name, so people will say, we couldn't find a Dr. Whitney. Well, no, there is no Dr. Whitney. But he goes to these continuing medical education courses, and he goes to his association meetings, and he's a good little informer, because then he'll come back and tell me what they're saying. Right. And what he found when it came to Gardasil, he was at a meeting where a gynecologist was accepting money to promote the topic Gardasil as one of the speakers at that event. So when he raised his hand about Gardasil and said, wait a minute, you know, the HPV doesn't really harm children, harm women anyway, in a very small percentage,
yes,
or even a threat of cancer, they shut him up so fast. He said, Anita, it made my head swim. So that's how controlled the information is. When a doctor comes in and raises a question, they shut him up super fast.
Wow.
And he was sitting next to one of medical school friends who had already investigated the vaccination issue, who kind of nicked him in the ribs and said, you better keep your mouth shut.
Corporations, they really do control almost everything.
Right.
I mean, and on your site, you have something about the United States being a corporation.
Right.
Can you give us a little bit of a background of how this happened, how the United States became a corporation, and why did it become a corporation?
Well, there's different stories I've heard on that and that I've read on that. And a lot of people have read volumes and volumes and volumes. I did not do that. I listened to others who have, and we all know that the Washington District of Columbia is a municipality. I think everybody knows that. It's a municipality. When they established the Washington, D.C. municipality, what they did is adopted the Constitution for the United States, renamed it the Constitution of the United States, and from that point forward, they represented this corporation as being our sovereign government. Okay, so all those people in D.C. really only have authority over the District of Columbia. But over the years, they have gotten more and more power, and I know you talk about the bankers. Once they got control of the financial system for the corporation, well, then it appears, Dave, that there were no limits. They just went forward. They got control of the Treasury. The bankers did. So really what's behind the whole thing, including the vaccine and the big pharma, is this banking cartel. They got a hold of the Treasury in 1920 when they passed the Independent Treasury Act. Mm-hmm. Then when they bankrupted the corporation and Louis McFadden, we have that on our website. If you look at anticorruptionsociety.com on the source document page, scroll down and you'll see something that says Louis McFadden, an astounding discovery. He was right there in Congress during the 20s and 30s watching how the bankers pillaged all the assets of the corporation and bankrupted it, basically. They think they stole it all fair and square, but they stole it all. And once they bankrupted the corporation, then they managed to get all the states to sign on to this bankruptcy. So they completely recreated everything again in 33 when they took away the people's gold and got the states to agree to all of this. And they gave us Federal Reserve notes, funny little pieces of paper, right? Mm-hmm. To use as money, which they still to this day, they control, right?
That is absolutely correct.
Yep. So that's how this corporate structure took over the country. They did so by bankrupting the original corporation, and then they're the trustees of the bankruptcy, and they have been making economic policy. Private corporation called the Federal Reserve has been making economic policy since the passage of 1913, the Federal Reserve Act. Don't you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. And what's so interesting when you talk about this corporate structure, and I hear a lot of people talk about the dollar, Dave, and I just use different words than other people, but it makes it look different. If you call it the dollar, you get one impression. Mm-hmm. But if you understand the Federal Reserve note is the private script of a private cartel, right?
Yes.
Okay. And if every time we said the dollar, we said the private currency of Rothschild's cartel, things would look completely different, because then along comes Bretton Woods and they made Rothschild's private currency the world reserve currency. And then along comes the advent of the petrodollar. And what we really have is the petro private Federal Reserve note. Now you can see how they got so much power. Because it's their private currency.
That is correct.
Yeah. Now, most financial experts don't talk about that, do they?
No, they do not.
Well, I wonder why not, though. They all know it says Federal Reserve note right on it.
I think everyone has been brainwashed to just look at it as the dollar. They don't even look to see if it says Federal Reserve note. They don't look to see if, they don't see it. They just see, the United States dollar. And I think people have been brought up and brainwashed into thinking that this is the dollar that is created by the United States.
Right. They really have. And sadly, because it's a private cartel doing it, they can crank out as many of those puppies as they want, and they do. And they can throw it at any agency, like the Public Health Agency, the CDC agency. They can throw them anywhere they want, because they're all subject to having to use this private currency. And that is what they're doing. They fund that which serves their purpose, and they deny funding to that which does not.
Federal government right now is basically a huge corporation.
Right.
Now, why did the states and local governments also incorporate?
Well, that really transpired quite a while ago, but basically they want them to be equal, and we can get into that, maybe not today, on another day. They want them to be equal so they can contract with them. And that's what they do. They contract the municipality, they contract with the counties, they contract with the states. They brought Common Core in with a contract. And they get this, and they're bringing in the police state by contracting with the counties, here, sign the contract. Here's the terms and conditions. We'll give you this equipment. We'll give you this money. And here's what you have to do for it. Now, I'm not making this up. My son-in-law works for the state in the accounting department. And when I asked him about grant contracts, he's very familiar with that. The employees of these corporations are very familiar with that. In fact, our county, on their very website, they have a page where all those who visit the website, and particularly the employees, can go and see what contracts are available from the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security. Click on this and you'll see. And that's how they're doing it. They're contracting with them. Grant contracts. I've seen these corporate grant contracts. My friend in California filed a Freedom of Information request, and they sent it to her. And on the very front page, it says, enclosed is the grant contract. And then you open it up, and here's the terms and conditions, and then you look at the end. Only 2 signatures are required.
Wow.
So the people in that county, the people in my county, and I've tried to reach them, I'm having a hard time, even though I show them the evidence, are unaware that this corporate agenda is functioning while we're out there worrying about who to elect for city council or county commissioners. It doesn't matter. Once you elect them, they work for the corporation, and they're free to enter in all of these contracts without the knowledge or consent of the public.
But don't people say, well, oh, okay, the local government, the state government, yeah, they might be corporations, but they're non-for-profit. They don't, they're not making any money, and they do this to protect themselves. Don't people usually go along that track?
Well, I have found when I try to reach the locals and say, look, this is a corporation, that there have been bar attorneys every time I tried it, and they immediately changed the topic. Intentionally and immediately changed the topic, saying it's unimportant. Now, most of the public is conditioned to believe what the bar says. Mm-hmm. So I am quickly quieted, and he is considered the expert, and we move on. It's intentional. It is intentional that the bar attorneys do not want the public to know this is a corporate construct for profit. They do not want the people to know that, because it's a whole different legal system than what we think it is.
What do you mean a different legal system? Like what?
Well, it's a commercial contract legal system. In other words, we think we've got constitutional law. We don't. We have commercial law because they're all engaged in commerce. Have you noticed how they pass rules all the time? Crazy rules. Rules you don't even know about, and then they send their police out to inflict them on you and fine you for violating these crazy rules. And you had no say about the rule getting passed or put in place. None, right? But there it is. We've got a new rule. My friend in California, she got a letter from a municipal corporation, and it said, Dear Blue-Hoo, we have passed a new ordinance, and we want everyone who has any rental property to apply for a $700 environmental permit. Enclosed is the application. Now, the people had no say in that, Dave, none.
Yeah.
So what does that equal? Taxation without representation. They just let you know we got a new rule. We've decided to charge you this for that. Please send us a check.
And what happens if you don't?
Well, I'm helping people learn how to challenge that, and we're having some success because what we're finding is there's no lawful obligation for us to send money to these municipal corporations. We've got no contract agreement with them. They're all in commerce. Mm-hmm. They're required to have contracts. That should make sense to everybody. So we send letters back saying, dear, city council or city manager, I got your letter. I understand that you'd like this application. Could you please send me a document indicating that I have agreed to comply and enter into a contract with all your code rules and regulations? I don't recall signing such a document. So she got a letter back, and the letter back said, well, here's the code number, blue, 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 and we pass it on such and such a day. So she sent them another letter. Thanks for sharing. That's interesting. But I still need a copy of a signed contract that obligates me to your rules. And they are really at a loss. Because there's no such thing.
Yeah, they wouldn't have this on record. So what do they do at this point? They just
Well, they threatened. What they did with her is they threatened her then. Then they sent her a letter. They turned it over to their bar attorney, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a consultant, and he sent her a scary letter and said, if you don't comply, we will charge you $200 a day for every day you don't comply. Now, he was a private bar attorney, so she didn't even bother to answer that one. Mm-hmm. But they're going to try to scare her into contracting with them. Once she signs that form, that application from that corporation, giving that information, she is agreeing to participate in that program that they're trying to launch. And I hope I'm not confusing people, but it really is business. If you know business, you can see how it's business.
So everything that goes on now in the local, the state, the federal government, it's all contracts.
It's all, right. Commercial.
Yeah.
It's all commercial. Now, you asked a question, and I'd like to answer it. Who's running America? That is such a good introduction. That was a perfect question.
Okay.
Who's running America? It talks about everything I'm just telling you. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you can find it on anticorruptionsociety.com. It was prepared, I believe, in the late 90s by a lot of great researchers. You can find it also on barefootsworld.com. If you hit barefootsworld.com, who's running America? Who is running America? Or you can go to Anti-Corruption Society and scroll down, and we have that article in a little booklet form. Okay? Mm-hmm. So we have the article in a booklet form, and I'm going to read you some excerpts on who's running America.
Okay. Just
to help people understand. On page 4, it says, the Independent Treasury Act of 1920 suspended the de jure, meaning by right of legal establishment, unquote, Treasury Department of the United States government. Our Congress turned the Treasury Department over to a private corporation, which, when seen in its true light, is a fascist, monopolistic cartel known as the Federal Reserve and their agencies. On page 5, it says the Federal Reserve is at the root of most of our present statutory regulations in the control and regulation of virtually all aspects of human activity in the United States through successively socialistic constructions laid upon, and here's the answer, the Commerce Clause of the Constitution.
And what is the Commerce Clause?
Well, that is the clause on the Constitution where they tried to address how commerce would function. But when they say the Commerce Clause, you will hear Judge Napolitano said, well, how could they do Obamacare? He said, well, they put it on the Commerce Clause. They hide the fact that this is all a commercial enterprise today by citing, oh, well, we're allowed to do this because of the Commerce Clause. That's how they do it. That's the smokescreen. Okay? Then this wonderful piece goes on to say on page 6, page 13, the Uniform Commercial Code which has been adopted in whole or substantially by all states. In essence, all court decisions are based on commercial law or business law and has criminal penalties associated with it. Rather than openly calling this new law Admiralty Maritime Jurisdiction, it is merely called statutory jurisdiction. So what they've done is they've put a layer of a legal system by stealth, adopted by each state in the 50s and 60s, called the Uniform Commercial Code, which is statutory law. And they didn't bother to tell the people that this statutory system has supplanted both constitutional and common law.
With this, are they trying to do away with the rights and the Constitution?
Right. Yeah, they're eliminating representative government.
That's what they're doing.
Right. And that's why every one of us who tries to reach out to government to get some of our concerns addressed or complain about policies, none of us get any satisfaction. And in my community, you can't even talk to city council now because they've hired public relations people. So when you call them and say, wait a minute, well, I'll let you talk to our representative, and all of a sudden you're talking to a PR person whose job is to stroke you, say the right things, make you feel like you've been heard, and basically let you say what you want to say so you go away.
Right, and nothing ever gets done.
Nothing.
And most people just drop it, and that's the end of it.
That's the end of it. Yeah. Because as my son-in-law reminded me, once your county, your city, or your state accepts these contracts with the money connected, remember, it's all commerce, money is flying around everywhere, and they're coming from the Federal Reserve because they can conjure up whatever money they need to support any program they want to support. If the city or municipality or state does not abide by all the rules and terms and conditions of the grant contract, then they are made to return the money, which generally they can't do. They've already spent it.
Right.
So that's what's going on. This whole business world behind the scenes, well, we go and vote thinking something will change.
Right. We're voting and we think this is going to make a change. But really, when we vote someone into office, basically they have no power whatsoever. They're taking orders from basically the bankers, the corporations, and the other power structures. And
their contracts. And they don't work for you. That's the thing that I wish I could get everybody to understand. It's much like I was a member of the Sierra Club, and they would put out an invitation for the members to vote for the officers. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I would vote for the officers. Never did I for a minute believe that that officer represented me personally or my interests. But I would vote anyway. Right. This is the same thing. You're voting for the officers of the corporation. Once they take office, they don't work for you. You gave them the right to sit at the table and represent the interests of the corporation, which is what they do.
Ah, I see.
See, it's not, once you kind of see it, then you start looking at what they're doing and you start reading your newspaper and you say, whoa.
Yeah, everything.
That's what it is. Yeah.
A lot of people bring up the Social Security number, birth certificates, and, you know, they say, well, this is a way of bringing you into the corporate structure. From your research and what you've looked at, is that true at birth? They kind of have you?
Yes. Okay, and I'm going to read you this important part of a wonderful book, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, written by attorney Melvin Stamper. I will be forever grateful because I can't recommend this book enough. Mr. Stamper, in fact, he's hard to find. I hope they didn't do him in. I know that sounds a little creepy, but he really did expose the system beautifully, and he documented what he discovered beautifully. So any attorney who wishes to disagree with me can certainly read what Mr. Stamper had to say. And I'm going to read you a couple things I'm looking. It's on my website, anticorruptionsociety.com. The name of the piece is called The Real Law of the Land in America. And this is what Stamper put in his book. Massive registration of property through United States agencies, including the states of the Union, as instrumentalities of the federal government in bankruptcy. Remember, I said they went bankrupt and they signed them up.
Right.
Assured the United States and its officers and instrumentalities, which should be the states, that they would become wealthy beyond their wildest expectations, as predicted by Colonel House. Edward Mandell House had this to say in a private meeting with Woodrow Wilson from the private papers of Woodrow Wilson. Many will remember Wilson was the one who signed the Federal Reserve Act.
That is correct.
Right, okay. Quote, this is from the private papers. Very soon every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant, which is maritime law, under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading, which is the certificate of live birth that the mother signs, to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure our plans, and if by accident one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. That's what they consider Social Security, a benefit. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectation and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance, also known as Social Security. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. Unquote.
And they have been doing this.
They've been doing it. And there's your birth certificate right there.
Yeah.
That's right. We are the security for the Federal Reserve. No, people don't want to admit that. I think a lot of people don't understand it, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, I want to read one more thing,
Sure.
because this will make sense. This is just this one page, just kind of says it all, especially if you're someone like yourself who's kind of savvy about the financial world. You know,
Right.
to you, this will make more sense than most people, because the word security and security instruments don't intimidate you, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, they do some people, you know that.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going on because now you get together how the legal system and the financial system fit together. One has to go along with the other one. One is necessary to enforce the other one. In the 50s, the Uniform Commercial Code was adopted in most of the states as a means of unifying the generally accepted procedures for handling the new legal system of dealing with commercial fictions as though they were real. Security instruments replaced substance as collateral for debt. Security instruments could be supported by presumptive adhesion contracts. Debt instrument with collateral and accommodating parties could be used instead of money. Money and the need for money was disappearing, and a uniform system of law had to be put in place to allow the courts to uphold the security instruments that depended on commercial fictions as a basis for compelling payment or performance. All of this was accomplished by the mid-60s. Now, you can kind of see where the derivative thing that they created out of a bunch of nonsense fits into this, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so this has been an ongoing scheme for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Selling security instruments as if they're real. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but when they sell a gold certificate, Dave, is that real?
No, it's not. It's not attached to any. I mean, as everyone knows, they continually, sell the gold certificate on the same piece of gold, which most likely doesn't even exist, because they sold it way, way back at a different time. But they continually just use paper, pretend it's real. When we look at this entire thing with corporations controlling everything and the United States now being a corporation,
right?
What exactly is their end game in all of this?
To control all resources on the planet, including human.
They just want control.
Well, control is as good as ownership, but you don't have to own it. If you can control it. In other words, when they do the birth certificate game, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The mother signs it, then all of a sudden they create a security instrument out of that birth certificate. Okay? Now, they can make money off of this without having to take care of the baby. If you think about it. Remember? Yeah. You don't have to worry about storing the gold if you can make money off of a gold certificate.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what they're saying when he's saying commercial fictions.
Right. So
as though they were real. And it's all across the board, isn't it? They put in this layer, the corporate commercial fiction, all across the board.
We're living in a world where the country is a corporation. They want control of everything. Right. And we, the people, are sitting on the sidelines, not realizing, well, some of us do realize, but many people do not realize what's going on.
Right.
And we need a way to come together to kind of stop what is happening, because this is not what our founding fathers originally thought of when they thought of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They didn't think that this was going to become a corporation. They didn't want the Federal Reserve. All of this that we're seeing right now is nothing of what they dreamed of.
Right. It's all been done by stealth. And if you think about it, I mean, you and I didn't know the UCC came into our world in the 50s and 60s. So that is just nothing more proof that this was done by bar attorneys and law associations by stealth. Okay, the bankers needed, and this is again in this book, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, which is free online. Actually, you can get it free on a PDF online. The bankers needed a legal system, Dave, and I know this will make perfect sense to you, where contract law was superior to any other form of law. That way, whatever laws and contracts they could get you to sign, you could actually agree to sign away your right, and you do. In other words, if they get you to agree to a contract, they claim that that is you consenting. So in their twisted world, we still have the government we want. We're just agreeing to the terms one contract at a time. So if contract law is above any other law, let's just say you're tricked into signing a contract and it turns out that they want to take your child from you on Saturdays and Sundays and use her as a model in commercials. Mm-hmm. But they didn't make that very clear. Well, they want the contract to be superior to any rights that you might perceive that you have, because they will say you gave those rights up when you signed the contract.
So
you can sign away your rights, incidentally. That's what they want you to do. You can sign away whatever right you think you might have.
I don't know if you've seen it, but we've seen like the free speech areas where they say, okay, you have free speech in this area. We see a lot of colleges now not allowing people to like sell a Constitution booklet. They tell them you have to go over there. And it seems like at every turn, they're trying to chip away at the rights of the people.
Right. And the more people like myself, and what I'm talking about, this legal fictitious system that's in place, people have been trying to expose this for 20, 30 years. Okay, I am not new. Most of the research I've done is based on wonderful research that is done by many people prior to me. Mm-hmm. And it seems like what happens is the people involved in what I'm involved with keep passing the torch on to others.
Right.
And so now I'm in it and I'm passing the torch on to others, and people before me pass the torch on to me. And,
right.
Unfortunately, because they control the media, we haven't made as much progress. And if they can control what we say in public, just like that bar attorney when I said at that meeting, but the reason you're unhappy with city council people is because the city's a corporation and it's functioning for its own benefit, not ours. He shut me up so fast. They don't want people like you and I out in the public educating people that here's the real reason the government is so dysfunctional.
You see it at the local level, you see it at the state level, and you definitely see it at the federal level, right, where Congress, the president, I mean, you can just see it that they're not working for the people. They make it seem like they are.
Right.
But in reality, you can see they're working for sometimes foreign governments, corporations, bankers.
The banks, they're working for the people who control the money, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing.
They're working for the people who control the money. And the money monsters, I call them money monsters, they throw money at these agencies, and there are now 450 agencies associated with the federal corporation. 450. And you can go to the Federal Registry and look at that website, and your eyes will go, whoa. There are many people who've been exposing this agency network because they are installing rules via contracts that we end up having to live with. The whole Common Core scam came out of the Department of Education. That department in and of itself isn't constitutional. That's an agency of the federal corporation. They offered money to the states. 2 people in the states signed that contract. Okay? Then they went to the legislators to get the laws passed, which was a term and condition of the contract. Then all of a sudden, throughout your state, you see all your schools changed in front of your eyes. And you didn't vote for any of it. Nobody told you about it. They're still keeping the Common Core program quite secret, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're keeping the Common Core secret. They're changing the name of Common Core so people don't think it's Common Core.
Right.
And
right.
they did exactly what you said. It was kind of stealthy the way they did it.
Yeah.
And they kind of brought the states into it by going back when they had No One Left Behind, and they said they were coming out with this new program, Common Core. They actually gave the states money and said, listen, if we give you money, you'll accept the Common Core. And it's funny how they use terminology, because it sounds great, Common Core. Oh, yeah, we'll accept Common Core because it's going to be common. It's going to be the core of learning, and we'll definitely accept the money. And almost every single state fell into this until they got Common Core, and then they started to realize, well, wait a minute. This is why the New York Teachers Association, they had a huge problem with it, and they were protesting against it.
Well, and if you listen to that wonderful speech by Duke Pesta, I don't know if you...
I've interviewed Duke Pesta, yes. Okay,
well, did you notice how Duke Pesta said they convinced him to sign it without seeing it? We'll tell you the details later.
Yes. Oh,
okay, so they got them to sign the contract, and this is a common trick in this commercial contractual world. If they can get you to sign the contract without knowing what's on it, then they've got their legal system to enforce it. Let me give you an example. We went to buy a house behind me. We went to closing. We put 20% down, and we're looking at the closing papers, and on the first or second page, it stated that we assign all property rights to the lender as a term and condition of this mortgage. Well, we were under the impression that we owned at least 20% of the house right then.
Right.
So my husband said, well, I'm just going to take a look at this. So I can't find where it says we'll get the property rights back when we pay off the mortgage. And we asked the clerk, I'm sure it's there, the closing clerk. I'm sure it's there. So we said, okay. So we signed it, and then we went home. It was in the summer. We sat out on the porch, put all the documents out, and got out our magnifying glass. We read every single page, and nowhere did it say we get any property rights back.
Wow.
So we go back to the bank, and we say, well, we can't find it. Well, then they say to us, well, of course you get your property rights back. There is a state statute passed in Ohio that will require that happen. And I said to her, and this is key what I'm saying, Dave, if you want to understand our commercial legal system, which is everywhere. I said to her, now wait a minute, if I sign this agreement personally, that I agree to this, which will supersede what? This contract or that statute? And what do you think the answer to that question is?
Well, the contract's going to win out.
The contract wins out.
Yeah.
So we canceled it. We had 3 days. When people get a mortgage, I think most people know they tell you you've got 3 days right of rescission.
That's correct, yes.
So we canceled it. I went to another bank thinking, well, maybe that's just this one bank. We tried, and we said to the loan officer, we want, verification that we get when we pay it off, we get all property rights back. So we sat down in closing, and she brings out the papers, and I look at them, and nowhere is it there. So I say to her, I'll tell you what, let's do, because you told me that, of course, we get the property rights back. She said, well, of course you will. I said, okay. So we went home, and we made out a one-page addendum. All we said in our addendum, per conversation with representative for such and such a bank, it is our understanding, please amend this mortgage with this amendment that we will get all property rights back when the note is paid off. Thank you so much. Hugs and kisses. Well, I brought that back and gave it to her. She said, I'll call legal. Legal said no. When I went in to ask her why, she was gone, and the name tag on her desk was gone.
Wow.
So that is a real life story of how important these contracts are that are going on because we still think we've got rights, and that should push come to shove, we'll be protected by our rights. We sign them away in contracts every day.
And we lose them.
And we lose them.
Yeah.
And if you go to their courts, their court's going to uphold that contract.
Yes, they're going to hold up the contract and say, this is what you signed.
Right. Exactly. And I've had that happen to me personally, so I know for a fact that's what happens. So it's important that people understand that they're dealing with a commercial business contractual entity calling itself a legitimate government. It's really just a monster doing business.